technology addiction, social isolation, bad brain development, and also a disruption on their sleep schedule. The sleep schedule is because of the radiation that all of the screen time gives us, since it affects our sleep cycle, and it can affect us and lead us to have insomnia and other things like that. And it has also been linked that using prolonged screen time can have people develop symptoms of ADHD, even though it has not been proven whether using technology will develop ADHD, or if people with ADHD are more prone to develop a technology addiction.
Now that we have explored some of the harmful points that technology may have on children, let's discuss about any particular reason that technology may benefit children, helping them to develop any cognitive abilities or even social skills.
Well, I did find an investigation in a survey by the PBS stating that the access to technology to students in elementary schools did give them familiarity with these technologies and devices, as well as give them a more cooperative mindset when working with their peers. So it did kind of became a tool for them to learn to problem solve as well as interact with other people. And I did also find another study by the researchers of digital ethics led by, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but Nitecho Huda, that they reported an increase in empathy and acceptance of diversity through the modeling the pro-social behaviors. This is stating that although in early infancy, which I agree, it can be a risk to lead children and babies into kind of presenting these antisocial behaviors, when it's at a later stage, around 5 to 6 years old, I believe, it's when they learn to read and write, that they can understand better what they are doing and using, and this has led to the increase in empathy and acceptance through diversity. So I do think that's important to notice, to kind of show that although in a bad, I'd say, management of the technology can lead to those negative effects, once it's done at the right, I guess, age range, from like a bit later on, and under the right circumstances, it does have a lot of potential benefits.
Yeah, I also agree that it is important to notice the age range, because when it comes to elementary school, children used to start around 5 to 6 year olds until 12-year-olds. So this may be helpful, but maybe in another age range, maybe when they are less sensitive to these to screens or any of the effects that we already discussed. So, what is what you personally consider an appropriate age to give children access to screens, as we were mentioning before, and how much time is too much time of technology exposure?
Well, I don't have an exact time limit for the children because everyone is different and one size does not fit all. However, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends for children ages 2 to 5 to limit screen time to 1 hour a day of high quality programming. As the child grows, you decide how much media to let your child use, but establishing rules and setting reasonable limits for your child's use of digital media is recommended. And I think too much time is when your child doesn't want to go out and play in the sun anymore, or just it's always on his room or her room playing video games.
Okay, so what you're saying is that too much time is when they get into an obsession or an addiction to technology.
Yes, and they disconnect from the real world the outside world.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to add to this?
Yes, well, right now it's kind of unavoidable for a child to use technology because we are on a generation that they call iPad babies, and well, so it is a very used form of entertainment. And just as Paulina says, it's not necessarily bad, but it does have to be limited. And since we are talking about children between 0 years old and 7 years old, I think it is very important to give them time to interact with other children and play and read and mostly develop their curiosity through other activities that are not technology.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned the term of iPad babies, I was very curious about this topic, about how children are often given the access to technology to distract them. So, what would you consider? Would you consider that technology has become a tool for parents to neglect their children, meaning leave them with a cell phone so they can be distracted without actually considering the negative effects that this may have on them?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned before, from personal experience, I do feel like it's been utilized as a way to kind of distract the children instead of actually helping them. And I do think this is more of a parenting issue than a technology issue, because this type of neglect does happen even before the implementation of technology such as iPads and iPhones. Before, it could be where, yeah, and instead of being the cell phone that's being given to them, it could have been something like a toy or a book. So I think if you take away the technology in general, it does become a sense of the parents neglecting their children with whatever they have at hand and what they have to help them. And I also think this is sort of an issue in regards to, well, the appropriate usage of the technology. According to a study in the United Nations, they found that asking children who they ask for help when regarding a negative issue, be it through technology or the internet, they would first turn towards their friends, and second to the parents, and third to a professional. So it kind of shows that there's really not there's more tendency to seek help from others than their parents directly.
Okay. Yes, it's a very controversial topic because you can't tell any parent how they should raise their child, but there are some cases where some people consider that giving them cell phones or iPads or any kind of technology like screens of TV may be a way to distract them and to not pay attention to them. So I don't know if someone wants to add anything to that, or?
Well, in some of the chain restaurants in the United States, like Red Lobster and Buffalo Wild Wings, they have it's like a tablet on the table with learning games instead of like cartoons and things like that, so that the child can entertain himself meanwhile it's waiting for the food.
Okay, so it's more about the way that technology is implemented.
Yes.
Okay. So following this idea, does technology help children to prepare themselves for eventually going out on society for their own? Or would children develop a mistaken idea of how society works based and influenced by technology?
Well, I personally believe that it does help them be prepared for the, I guess, real world or outside world. Given that, well, as we've stated, technology becomes more and more intertwined with our lives, it's really become a tool, and like everything, children do need to learn to use this tool, especially right now, given that most jobs are, well, it require the use of technology, and in those who are starting to be more and more replaced by robots and whatever. So it becomes kind of essential for them to learn this. And in regards to the question if it's going to give them a wrong perspective of society, I think I'd like to cite again the research by Mipachu Huda and his team, stating the increase in empathy and diversity. So this really shows that it gives them at least a basic of understanding, as well as a open-mindedness to, well, society, like at least at its present, where it's more about being diverse and understanding of others. I think technology does give them that opportunity to have that experience and understand this.
Okay. So now that we come to a general idea that technology can be helpful, but maybe not in excessive way, how can technology be monitored to ensure that the content isn't harmful for children?
Well, technology can be monitored by the parents by promoting a good communication. Since the use of technology doesn't have to be an activity the children has to do on his own. Since parents can spend time with their children at the moment when they decide to use their devices to not only monitor the content they're seeing and that they only feel like observing every step they take, but to provide a favorable use of technology as well as having a beneficial result to the children.
Very interesting.
There's actually another benefit. Just as Jana said, when an adult is using that technology with the child, it is proved to be beneficial for the children, and it can increase the neural links on their brain. So as long as there is someone monitoring the child, it can be very good for them. And yes.
Well, before concluding, I wanted to ask you, could there be a balance between the time that children are allowed to access technology, meaning from video games to TV or even social media? How can this be balanced?
Well, we can first start by establishing clear rules and set reasonable limits for the child's use of digital media. Like, for example, encouraging unplugged and unstructured playtime, creating technology-free zones, such as during the mealtime or one night a week. And also setting and enforcing daily or weekly screen time limits and curfews before bedtime so that it won't disrupt their sleep. And considering the use of apps that control the length of time for each of the devices.
Well, I generally think that we can have a balance since we don't have to limit children to develop different skills that can be acquired by the use of technology, as well as letting the children achieve different skills with different experiences, learning abilities outside the use of technology. So since as everything in life, it works if we find a balance without limiting or without exceeding.
Okay, so I think that with all this information, we can make a conclusion. And for this, technology, as it has been mentioned before, can be harmful to children more in the early stages from newborns to 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. And it may develop some cognitive issues or neurological negative effects, as you have mentioned at the beginning of the roundtable. But also, we live in an era of technology, and we can avoid that children should have access at some extent to technology to be prepared to access this society of today. But we need to find a balance and to be monitoring what they can be exposed to, so the harm is diminished, and we also have all these beneficial effects that have been discussed as well. So we can conclude that it's all about the balance and to parents to be monitoring what children are exposed to. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your opinions, and I think that with that we can finish our discussion.